You are listening to Despair by Michael Brockbank. Episode 11. I'm telling you, this is a waste of our time. The voice echoed through Jordan's ears as he began to muster what strength he had. He didn't know how long he was out, but the throbbing in the back of his head perhaps was a sign that it had been for quite some time. I'm not about to just leave him to rot. I do hope the irony isn't lost on you, brother. Jordan's eyes began to flutter open. The morning sunlight made its way into the manor through the broken windows. The sound of dripping water in the background was the only sign left of the storm from the night before. The pain in his head made opening his eyes hard enough, but the sunlight in his face, though refreshing, only made the process that much more difficult. "Ah, you're awake, Ranger. How do you feel?" It was then that he realized he was tied to a chair. Immediately he began to struggle as the fight in him returned. "Not well, eh?" "Untie me, foul creature," the hunter demanded, still struggling with his bindings. "Has that statement ever worked for anyone in the past?" The skeleton replied calmly, picking up his book from the floor next to him. "I mean, I can't imagine an order like that, where the captee may clearly dismember the captor, would ever really work in such a setting." The confusion returned to Jordan as he still wasn't able to comprehend how a skeleton was able to speak, let alone offer quite the insight into the present situation. "What is it you want from me? If you're going to kill me, get it over with," Jordan asked, still with a level of anger in his tone. Even though he was doing his best to intimidate the skeleton, it was indeed curious as to why he was still alive. After all, the undead outside from the night before wanted nothing more than to make a meal out of the hunter. "I told you before, I am not your enemy. In fact, I would bet that I am more confused about this whole thing than you are. One moment I'm, indisposed, and then I woke up in a box in this condition. Wouldn't that confuse you just a bit?" The skeleton sounded sincere enough. Even if this was a ruse, there was no logical path for the pretense. Jordan relaxed his struggle against the bindings on the chair. "You really don't know what you are, do you?" he asked, looking into the empty sockets of the skull. In all of his years hunting the dead, never once did he manage to have a conversation with one other than grunts and groans. "Aside from being a shallow form of my glorious self? No. In fact, neither of us really know what's going on." "Neither of you?" Jordan asked, but he already knew the answer. It was the other voice from the man who appeared before him before he lost consciousness. "Yes, my brother. My apologies. In all the excitement, I completely forgot to introduce myself. Though, it's kind of hard to make introductions when someone's swinging an axe at you. My name is Felix, and this is my brother Jared," the skeleton said, holding out a hand to his left. As he made the introduction, a wispy outline of a man formed, the same from the night before. "And you're both self-aware?" "If you mean having free will, yes. We just don't know how we are this way," the spirit replied. "That is why we're here. I'm hoping this ancient tome will help us understand what is going on and why we are animated after death," the skeleton said, holding up the tattered book. "Time is not on our side, brother," Jared said as he dissipated into nothingness. "He's right. We must be on our way. As much as I would love to sit and have a decent conversation with the living again, we really do need to be leaving." Felix stood up from his chair, holding the book tight to his ribcage. "Don't worry. The ropes will release once we're a safe distance away. Although we had a nice conversation, I don't really trust the anger in your eyes. Until we meet again, Ranger." And with that, the skeleton hastily made its way through the manor and exited the main door. The sound of creaking wood and ancient metal echoed loudly throughout the structure. After a short time had passed, the bindings on the chair indeed loosened. Jordan was able to easily free himself. Lying on the floor next to him were both his silver axes. As he picked them up, he thought about pursuing the two men. Every fiber in his being told him he should. But then he thought about the previous conversation. Could it be true that the skeleton and spirit had no recollection about how they were created? He had never encountered anything like them before, and doubted he ever will again. He stared at the doorway of the manor for quite some time, debating on giving chase. The two let him live when every other undead creature would have torn the hunter to shreds. Slowly sheathing the two blades, he decided this was not his fight. He was sent to deal with the walking dead outside. The two he met inside the manor clearly had nothing to do with the interaction with the village. In fact, There was no mention of a skeleton or a spirit from the townsfolk. Jordan stepped out of the manor to survey the landscape. He was ready to continue his fight with the dead should any appear. But as the sun illuminated the surrounding forest, there wasn't a sound to be heard outside from the chirping of a few nearby birds. This was a good sign to the hunter, as the birds are often chased away by the aura of the dead. Aside from standing outside the dilapidated structure, and the slight stench coming from around the corner of the manor where he dispatched the first group, it was shaping up to be a nice day. He set off to return to the village while still mulling over his interaction with Jared and Felix. Something continued to gnaw at him regarding the interaction, though. Could these two men be a prelude to something far more sinister? Or is it just by chance that he happened across the only two dead creatures with free will? What was so important about that tome? Jordan made the decision to investigate the situation further once his dealings with the villagers was complete. It was nearing midday by the time Jordan made it back to the village. The surrounding forest seemed void of any decomposing aggressor, which made the hunter feel uneasy. Of course, the villagers could have been exaggerating the sheer number of the walking dead. Most people he's come across in the past often inflate tales, especially stories dealing with the fallen. However, he did notice a large number of footprints in the mud throughout the trees during his investigation. Far more than that of the few he had slain and the two men he met in the manor. But as they were leading in every direction, it was next to impossible for the hunter to determine which way the remaining dead had traveled. Jordan neared the village only to discover that it appeared empty. No signs of life, none of the farm animals from before, and the birds seemed to steer clear of the area. It was as if something scooped up all the life in town and whisked it away without a trace. The hunter began looking for signs of struggle, but was unable to find any. Even if the horde of undead ravaged the village, there would be obvious signs of battle, not to mention an array of limbs and torsos littering the landscape. The dead were not the cleanest of eaters. In this instance, however, there was simply nothing except for the structures themselves, standing witness and unable to speak of what atrocities came from the night before. Guess that means I won't get paid, the hunter said to himself in a whisper, pulling one of the axes free from his belt. He began his trek to the inn to collect his belongings, still looking for any sign of what happened. With each step into the village, the atmosphere felt more dense. There was a darkness to the landscape, though it was bathed in sunlight, as if to mock the hunter's beliefs about darkness bringing darkness. No, although the village had the visage of a lively locale, the ambience told a much different story. Every sign of life had been taken away, leaving only the inanimate witnesses behind. "They're gone," yelled an unfamiliar voice from behind Jordan.